you're 18 years in.
Right.
So you know a thing or two about a thing or two.
Yeah, just
relative to this.
Yeah.
And it's not been an easy road.
No.
And you were really emphatic about calling this particular episode the Culture Conundrum.
Yes.
So why the word choice?
Because it's hard. And the reason why is because it centers 100% around people and our beliefs and our behavior. And you know what? We're just not a cakewalk. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Our first podcast dropped last week.
I know.
That's crazy.
Can't believe it.
And today's the 14th.
And today's the 14th, so this is the second.
This would be number 2.
Okay.
And we're still going.
Well, that's good news.
No one's thrown up their hands. I think you almost threw up your hands today.
A little bit.
But then I redeemed you.
Yes, thank you.
Is that the right word?
Yeah, well, you just get
I
me back
brought you
on
back.
track. You've always got me back on track.
I'll get you back.
Yeah.
And today, something new is we have a nice little treat. Cupid has been here for
Yes.
Valentine's Day. I don't know that there's like a little, it is a little, that's like a Santa for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I guess if you subscribe to that.
He came and he dropped off, or she came and dropped off this little treat.
Yes. We have some lovely Joe Malone, which is one of my favorites. If you spent any time with me at all, you know that it's one of my not only favorite things, one of my favorite brands, but places where I spend time. I like to have Joe Malone around.
You're an aesthetically driven person, an extrovert.
I am.
Yes.
So I wanted our Studio A, where we're so proud of. I wanted to, not only does it look amazing, I wanted it to smell good. So yeah, that's my little Valentine's treat to you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful.
I'm still looking. Where's mine?
Oh yeah. Oh, boo.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe there'll be something dropped on your desk later.
Just kidding.
I have to do a quick run down to the Nordstroms.
No. Not needed.
We're talking
But
about,
I do want to say that Joe Malone, if we're talking about self-smarter people, I mean, her story is incredible. And we in the United States literally didn't really learn about Joe Malone until Estee Lauder. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, because she did a study on, a show on Oprah, but her story, and I would just recommend that everyone give it a listen on NPR, How I Built This.
Oh.
Her story is incredible.
Okay, I will listen to that.
That company was only 9 years old when she sold it to Estee Lauder, and she's already started another one. So anyway, I just have mad respect for her business story, but the product quality, even though it's owned by Estee Lauder, has been maintained and preserved. So
I love that. And it smells of lime and clementine.
no,
Basil?
lime, mandarin, basil.
That's
is the scent.
Well, it smells fabulous.
Thanks.
So we've got a big
you
topic today. You're going to be talking about big stuff.
Yeah, today we're going to go deep and unpack culture. And I honestly think it's one of the most misunderstood and undervalued assets in business, or honestly in any group, really. And so no matter where you are in your leadership journey, or if you're a part of a group, we're doing this episode, and actually the next one too, on culture, because it is so important. And we've learned a lot on this journey, and we want to share that. And so we're excited to dive into this topic, because it's going to end up being a thread in a lot of what we talk about on this podcast.
Yes, and odds are people who are listening to this also struggle or have questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable, because I think culture, again, and we're going to unpack that more, is it's largely misunderstood. We've kind of put it in this little box, and so I'm excited to talk about it. So just in case you're new to the podcast, I'm Danelle, and this is my partner in crime, Megan.
Hello.
But before we dive in, so you went to the Low Country this weekend with your girlfriends. I received, I don't know if they were late night texts, but they were.
Might have been late-ish, night-ish.
There was a lot of fun being had, and I loved it. So thanks for sharing that. And while I want to know a lot of details about that trip, the one question I want to know right now is, what was the best bite you had in the Low Country?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's tough, because there's bites everywhere, and bites are high priority on my friends list for things to do. And they're listening to this, they're like, that's right, she's right.
Yeah,
but
for
basically, I mean, in the Low Country, if it can be fried, it will be fried. And so fried chicken, fried pickles, fried whatever. But the actual best bite, I think if I had to put my pin on it, I would say it was this. I'm a sucker for veggies. Clearly, I guess pureed, but this was a pureed parsnip. Yes, with it had all the butter in it and yummy sea bass and a red wine reduction. So it was very, very scrumptious.
Well, great. Now I'm starving and we have an hour until lunch. So,
Sorry about that.
That sounds amazing. So, yay.
Okay, now my turn. Okay, so while we were there in the Low Country, specifically on Sunday, there was a lot of hoopla in the airport because there were some games on, football games. What was happening?
Very observant of you. Yes, it was the final 2 games that determined who was going to go to the Super Bowl. So yeah, it was a huge weekend.
Exciting.
And so what's interesting about those games and what you might have been witnessing in the airport is that I've been watching football as long as I can remember. Disclaimer, I'm a much larger college football fan than I am the NFL. But this year in particular in the NFL, the playoff games have been over the top exciting, like down to the last wire, overtime, field goal kicks, underdogs winning. It's really been an exciting postseason, in my opinion, in terms of NFL, except for the part where the Cowboys lost.
Right.
And so I would say that I haven't been this excited for a Super Bowl in a while.
Ooh.
Because I think there's some incredible stories. So you have LA in the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl is in LA. The other thing about LA is that the quarterback, Matthew Stafford, first of all, Georgia SEC, I'm a big SEC fan, and so he's a Georgia Bulldog, and he went to Highland Park High School here in Dallas.
Just down the street.
I know, so he's a local boy, so we're going to cheer for him.
Yes.
But on the other side of the ball are the major underdogs. Poor Cincy, they haven't been, I don't know, it's been eons since they've been to a Super Bowl, and they're led to that Super Bowl by haughty SEC, also LSU grad, Joe Burrows. I can't get his name right. Anyway, he's been there for 2 years, and he's leading this team to a Super Bowl, and he upset your guy on the way there, which
Patrick Mahomes.
He did. So
Red Raider.
It was a great game. I could have cheered for either one of those because I think they're both upstanding athletes and hopefully humans. And it was great. So I think it's going to be a great Super Bowl.
Yeah, I hope so.
I'm excited.
I'm going to fry things.
Okay.
And just pretend like I'm back in the Low Country. Okay, so you mentioned earlier that we're going to be unpacking culture. Mm-hmm. And really, it's important because on this podcast in particular, we're talking about things that are impactful to leaders. Right. And really with the hope that our own experiences can help somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would say that in this journey, I mean, I described the last 8 years of our 18 years journey on episode 1, but I would say that culture was the thing that I understood the least. And because of that, we ended up with a lot more struggles in our organization than, quite frankly, was necessary if I had truly understood what culture was and valued it more. And so that's why I'm passionate about us starting our episodes with culture. We're going to do 2 episodes talking about this because I do think it's absolutely critical to business, and we'll unpack why. And so that's why we're starting with it.
Yeah, and you are a business owner and our CEO. Mm-hmm. And so you've been doing this. We've talked about this in our past episode, but you are you're 18 years in.
Right.
So you know a thing or two about a thing or two.
Yeah, just
relative to this. Yeah. And it's not been an easy road.
No.
And you were really emphatic about calling this particular episode the Culture Conundrum.
Yes.
So why the word choice?
Because it's hard. And the reason why is because it centers 100% around people and our beliefs and our behavior. And you know what? We're just not a cakewalk.
Yeah.
And so understanding that now, it is a conundrum. And I think, at the root of the conundrum, I believe, is the basic lack of understanding of what culture really is and how it can positively impact your company. I think leaders we kind of can be scratching our heads. I mean, it's an elusive thing. And so so I think that makes it a conundrum. And I know that for a fact because that was the hardest part for me, was to understand that what it was that was impacting our business negatively, because we had all these external positive indicators. And once I really started to study culture, I started to understand it more.
So give me an example of what's a worst case scenario culture.
A worst case scenario for culture is that the leaders just decide that it's not important at all. And they keep their attention towards other aspects of the business, sales, operations, the things that are honestly easier to see, measure. I mean, I certainly did that for the first 10 years of this business. I was focused on being the best marketers that we could be and certainly running a healthy company. And so I understand that. And there's this quote that sticks with me. It's like, you can have all the right strategies in the world. If you don't have the right culture, you're dead. And while when I came into conscious of the importance of culture, we were nowhere near struggling from a performance perspective as a company, but our intention was to grow. And I knew if we didn't get our arms around this particular piece, starting with me, that we were going to continue to struggle as a company because we wanted to grow and we wanted to do more of the, incredible work that we were doing.
So you just said that leaders struggle with culture and understanding what it is.
Absolutely.
So what do you believe culture is?
Simply put, culture is the way we do things around here. And once I realized that through study and observation, is that it's behavioral, it's beliefs, that's what culture is. And I enjoy a good definition, so I have a few that I want to share with our listeners. But if cultures by definition are a group of people who come together around a common set of values and beliefs, then company culture is the same, regardless of the size of company. It can be 2 people, it can be 2,000. It's a group of people who come together around a common set of values and beliefs. And if we can see it in that light, it really started, for me, it really started to make sense. And I love this too. So culture, the definition said another way, is culture is about a team uniquely functioning when it's at its best. And the key with that definition is unique. Because what I understood in this journey, what I attempted to do is I would go out and study cultures and find case studies, and I would bring them back and try to implement them as they were at those organizations here at DMA. And that did not work. No. And the reason why is because we're at the root of it, we're unique groups, whether we're teams, whether we're companies, again. And so I think that approach, when I saw that particular definition, it made sense to me. I was like, wait a minute, this is when it dawned on me, oh, we're going to have to do this from the inside. And we're not going to we can learn a lot, but we're not going to necessarily build a one size fits all for the culture. So, and another one that I love is the culture of a company is the sum of the behaviors of all of its people. And so what I realized in this journey is that it starts with the leader, but when culture is at its best, everyone in the company is contributing to it and protecting it and nurturing it. So that was, that was a big aha as well.
Right.
In terms of what it was.
Right. Because in the days when culture was hard around here, everybody wasn't on the same page.
Correct.
There were some differences in value systems and just kind of what you just talked about, values and beliefs, which does indeed classify a culture. So you're totally making sense. I'm totally tracking with you. And I can see why you would want to name this conundrum, because it's very difficult. There's a lot to wade through in terms of information, and it's not something that's trivial or fluffy the way that people have typically described culture. So can you expand on that a little bit? What isn't it?
Well, I think it's interesting. Culture's hard to fully grasp to begin with. And the reason why is it's largely invisible, unwritten, and unspoken, but at the same time, it causes people the greatest pain, dissatisfaction, frustration, and failure. And when you think about that in the light of what culture is not, so if culture's how we behave, but at the same time, if we're all showing up and it can cause such dissatisfaction, I think it's because not only do leaders think of culture in one way, but so does the people at the organization. I think we largely don't understand what it is. And I think what we've done is we've put culture in this box but what it's not fringe benefits. It's not the happy hours, free lunches. I don't know, bringing your pet to work, all the things that we have been told to think that culture is, whether that's through the big companies, the startups, and that's where a lot of, study on culture comes from. It's not even the specific benefits like work remote or unlimited PTO, company vehicles. Culture's not that. And it's definitely not just for the HR folks. And I think that's another misconception is that's something that human resources can take care of. That's not that at all. And what I learned is that culture's not about what we do or what we get. It's about what we believe and our unified behavior as a team guided by clearly defined and accepted values and beliefs. And in the case of weak or dysfunctional, it's the opposite. There are no common beliefs. And so when you're looking at a dysfunctional culture, that's when you can really see it come to light.
So during the time when our culture was, as you described, struggling, would you say that we were all moving at the speed of our common beliefs?
Oh, no, not at all.
No. But over the last couple of years, you've really brought that sort of to light here. And I could probably go ask 4 people right now, or all of them. Do you feel like all of our beliefs and values are moving at the same speed now?
Right.
Yes. So that's what we'll unpack really in the next episode.
Correct.
We'll get deeper into that.
Yep.
But we also have talked about, I think it's important for people who are listening to understand you.
Okay.
Because you are a self-starter. You have become self-smarter, which is the goal for people listening. I think it's so interesting how we had this conversation outside of the podcast, but I think it's interesting to elevate right now how you were able to tie your experiences with cultures eons ago. I mean, I don't want to age us
well,
here.
Gosh,
I know. Sorry, I don't want to age
for using
anyone.
the word
But
eon.
When we dip back into our childhood, you've really dug deep here. And I think it's brilliant. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your exposure to cultures over time. What have you realized?
What's interesting is we've all been exposed to cultures over time, if we've been in any group setting. And while I was studying cultures, I really started to reflect on, wow, I've really been involved with some strong cultures. What can I pull from those experiences? And for me, my earliest recollection, obviously playing sports, that's one thing, but I think 4-H for me was one of the strongest cultures that, really put an impact on me. Like I feel like if someone was in 4-H for more than a year, let's say, and I walked up to that person today and they haven't been in 4-H for 20 years, I think we could probably do the 4-H motto together. And, so there's things that, or even if I'm speaking to someone in 4-H that's in 4-H today, we could have a commonality because there are such tenets that are grounded in that particular organization that have been there for so long and that have been preserved through the years. There's a commonality there and a connection. And so, again, in my early days, I think 4-H was one that I really can see really start to shape my appreciation for being involved with a healthy culture. And then I went to Texas A&M, and there's literally books written on the culture of A&M. And we have a saying, from the outside looking in, you can't understand it. And from the outside looking in, you can't understand it. And from the inside looking out, you can't explain it. To me, that saying in itself that we're taught before we even go to A&M, and then we're taught the yells and all these traditions, that is deep, a deep culture there. Yes. And you know right away by going on campus, even when you're just there to visit the school, if it's right for you. And it can almost be polarizing. Like you can see yourself almost immediately or you can't. And so when I think about A&M, and I think about the fact of being an alumni and we're recruiting from that school, I can walk in and talk to a freshman at A&M and we can go on and on for hours about so much we have in common relative to that particular culture. So when I was studying culture, I was like, wow, those two things have shaped it so positively. And then when I started my career, I worked for a family business, and that family business grew exponentially during my time there. And it was 8.5 years, and we had the opportunity. Part of our strategy was acquiring companies across the U.S. Some of them we started in particular cities, but most of them we acquired. And I started to learn then about cultures coming together and how that could be. And we struggled a lot with it, but I didn't know it was the term culture. I was just thinking, we were taking over this company. They need to start thinking and walking this way. And we did, I look back without having all the tools that are available today. We did an okay job. And then we were bought by a large company. In 2003, a corporate company, and in the fresh produce business. In that moment, the first week, I look back on that, and being part of the executive team, we were told that not a lot of changes in the Dallas location, which is where I was located, were going to be made. And now I realize they meant to the operations. But what I didn't realize is that literally on week one, during the night, I don't know if they were ghosts or bandits, or robbers. I don't know what they were. But literally, people from corporate came in and took anything from people's desk or workspaces that had our company's logo on it.
Which is kind of ooky.
Oh, no. That in itself was bad. But here's the real kicker where I really learned what a bad culture was, or a culture where I didn't fit anymore. There's no such thing as a bad culture, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But we had a mural painted for our owner who had become terminally ill. And the side of our building was on the DART rail train. So we had this beautiful, I'd say 25-yard mural painted of the history of produce and kind of the future. So we hired these incredible artists, and his likeness, his portrait was in the middle, and he was holding an apple.
Hand painted.
I mean, and we had the mayor, we had an unveiling, the mayor came out. This was an piece of art for our company, and memorialized one of our, he wasn't the founder, his dad was, but one of our owners. Yeah. And it was a gift to the city for the people who would ride by on the train, because it was absolutely gorgeous. During that first week, the people who bought our company, the company that bought our company, came in and painted their logo over his likeness. And from that moment, something disconnected from me. And I nothing changed from my business. In fact, I got a huge promotion that week. And I had my dream job. I was vice president of all the things that I had hoped for came true. They treated me like royalty. And in that moment, something disconnected. And looking back on it now, for what I know, I disconnected myself from the value system.
Yeah, the culture.
They didn't share the same. I didn't share the same values that they shared.
Because you would never do that.
No,
never in a million years.
And I was hanging on to nothing was going to change, and they didn't change the operations. In fact, they invested in them. They invested in me. But what I realized is that wasn't enough, and through this study, that became very crystal clear. So I think I'm not any different than anyone else if we take the time to really think about being involved with cultures that shaped us, whether that's sports teams, churches, associations of any kind. I mean, you were in a sorority and you were in a dance squad, kicking those legs up high. The way you talk, even when I hear the team around here or different people talk about groups that they're associated with, I'm picking up on cues about that culture.
Yeah.
And that culture is this way because of that. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm kind of geek out on it.
It is geeky, but once you see it, and then I mean that with the most respect, because I understand, but it's once you see it, you can't unsee it.
No, you can't.
There's no going back. Once the eyes are open, it's just so blatantly obvious, which leads me to my next question. So you just described 4-H, which for people who don't know, is...
Well, shame on them. I'm sorry.
For people who may be listening to this in places where 4-H is not available to them.
Okay, that's fair.
Could you give just a literal, like 1 bullet, 2 bullets? What is it?
What is 4-H?
Yes.
I mean, it's a community-based organization for I mean, it starts at 9 and goes all the way through high school, but for, let's say, school children starting at the age of 9, that helps them with fundamentals of basic life skills.
That's awesome.
Basic life skills.
People need to be looking into this.
They do, but it's becoming, unfortunately, it's not as prevalent as it once was, but definitely in rural America it is.
Yes.
And so that's fair that not a lot of people would know what that is, but it's also largely known because of the animal aspect of it.
Yes.
So I'll just stop there or I'll talk for another 2 hours.
Very helpful. But then you talked about your experience at Texas A&M University.
Please tell me we don't have to explain that institution.
You don't.
That incredible institution.
And then you talked about as an employee of a business that was bought out by another business and the way that made you feel. So as a business owner and a CEO, I'm sure it was a different lens. It probably looked and felt a lot different. So what has that experience been like?
I mean, first of all, I have learned so much, and the experience has been, it's been hard, but it's also been wonderful in so many ways. And I think anything that you're either learning and that you can now see so clearly, and again, culture, you never stop learning about culture because it's constantly changing. But it's been hard. And I would just say, what have I learned through this process is, I think Simon Sinek. So, and again, we'll put all of this information in the show notes. He's been a North Star for me relative to culture, and I've studied a lot, but I would say that the way he explains culture is, for me as a leader, has been most helpful. And what he says is, your company doesn't have a culture, it is a culture.
That's so impactful.
And he also helped me understand that cultures cannot be transferred, installed, or added, which goes back to the experience that I had with the company that bought ours. You can't just install a culture. And we learned that too when we were going through acquisitions. And cultures can only evolve from the culture you already have. And see, what I was trying to do once I realized with DMA that we had a weak one was I was just trying to, go buy a new one. Let's go. I say buy, let's buy the tools or whatever it needs.
Yes.
And when I realized this, I started to say, okay, we don't necessarily need to erase ours and start from scratch. There's a lot of good here, but we do need to remodel, which is what we will talk about in the next episode. And I think from his teachings, what really changed my mindset about culture the most is when he says that culture of a company is like the character of an individual. And this is where I get chills. We know that when we look at someone's character, we wonder things such as, what are they like when they're stressed? How do they behave in good times and bad? How do they treat people? Do they maintain their compassion, humility, and positivity no matter what? Is that, it's the same for a company. And your company will have a culture no matter what. And the question is whether or not you want to leave its development to chance or consciously go about constructing a culture in which your employees and business are at their best. Mm. And this is from Start with Why, his famous book. And when I realized that really it's a reflection of each individual and how we show up together, that is when I think, and obviously it started with me, which I know we've talked about that in episode 1 and we'll be talking about it again. But I realized that the culture was weak because of the way I was showing up. Mm. And that's where the work started. And so I also learned in this process, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, is that there are no good or bad cultures. There's only strong or weak. You can also say functional or dysfunctional. Because there's times where I could see our culture as being weak, and because of dysfunction, we had some dysfunctional things that happening. Yeah. And honestly, when I took the good and bad off the table and I started to see it as weak or strong, I felt empowered as a leader because I know that I can make weak things stronger. Mm-hmm. I know that if we can identify dysfunction and put names to it and language towards it and put examples around it, that we can change it, because I knew I knew in my heart I wanted to be a better leader, and I knew I wanted this to be an organization where people wanted to come and stay for longer than what they were staying. And I knew that, and so I knew if I could just take each step to make it stronger, that those things would start to fall in line, and this would become more of an organization that was not only financially supporting people, but supporting people in the, in every sense of what a company should be doing, which is in really making your life better because you work here.
Yes.
Now it's a two-way street, but we could be doing so much more. And I knew that. So that really helped. And that's one thing I would really want leaders to take away from, is that your culture has weak aspects to it today, as does ours. And ours is just, I don't know, you tell me. I think it's as strong as it's ever been.
Oh, absolutely.
But there are still things we're working on, and we plan to grow a lot.
Right.
So we're going to have to continue to hone that.
Yes. Piece
of reality is keeping our culture strong while we grow.
Right. And so you just tapped into something that I'm really curious about, because, then the conundrum becomes, okay, so now that I have, I don't know that there's a solution to culture. Every company is different. There's no, right size fits all, but should I expect that my culture is going to constantly evolve? Is it going to stay the same? How do I embrace for impact there, in terms of the reality?
Well, culture's constantly changing.
Okay.
And it's constantly changing because it revolves around people. So people not only, let's say, even if the amount of people that you have at your company doesn't change drastically year to year, those people are changing. Mm-hmm. So they may have come into your company in their 20s, and now they're getting married, and now they're having children. So if you just think about us going through our own journey as human beings, that in itself causes behavioral changes, and it could, in some cases, belief changes. So the company, needs to be anchored in many ways, because the people are going to change. And so that will hopefully, because you're aware of it as a leader and a leadership team, you can use that to your advantage, and you can hone it. And it can only strengthen your culture when you're aware of it and you're conscious of it and you're investing the time and effort into it.
So a lot of what you're talking about is rooted in observation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%.
Right? Mm-hmm. So everybody's busy. Time is our biggest limited resource. Mm-hmm. So if I'm listening and taking advice from you, what should they do? What should they be observing about the cultures that they're currently a part of?
Okay. First of all, I think the simple question you need to ask yourself is, what does it feel like to work there? Or what does it feel like to be a part of that group? How does it make you feel? And by the way, that determination shouldn't be made in a vacuum.
Right.
Work is called work for a reason.
That's right. Stressful times.
Yeah, we should be able to discern from work. A work challenge
yes.
is different than a culture challenge.
Yes.
So if you're having a bad day at work, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a culture issue.
Throw up your hands and walk out the door.
But if you're struggling with something at, say for instance, as an example at your work, but you don't feel like there's anyone that you can go to, or if there's not a feedback look, or there's indicators of that. But let's not let a bad day determine, the culture around here sucks. I think it's what is my general feeling about working there? Do they care about me? How's information being shared with me? What do I actually know about this company? Do I know what our values are? Do I know what our mission and vision are? Is that information being shared with me on a regular basis? And I think that's something that I would say to anyone. And I would observe also, and I can't help it, it's the marketer in me, what key messages and communications are coming across that are resonating with me and others, especially if you're in a position where you're leading people within that organization. What key messages do you know that you're supposed to be sharing, and how's that going for you as someone who should be, sharing those messages on the company's behalf? And so I think communication is such a core part of a healthy culture. It needs to be clear. It needs to be concise. And it certainly needs to be consistent. And I think that was one of the hardest things. And I know you and I struggled together with that, is that we were raised, and I say raised, not necessarily in this instance necessarily by our parents, but through education systems too, is you don't need to be, if you're having to be told something more than a couple of times, you're not listening. And so I think we have struggled with, but we've already said that. Wait a minute, I've already talked about that with the team. Why isn't there change
by osmosis
happening? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And so once heard this podcast, and it stuck with me, is that, it was said that my role as CEO is chief repeat officer. And so what I had to do is to get creative with, because I didn't want to say this exact same things over and over again.
Right.
But I had to find ways to really operationalize the messages across everything that we do, and find ways to say, this is an example of when our core value is being elevated. And once I learned to do that through my journey of becoming a better communicator internally here at the company, I was, I'm a decent one externally. But I've really spent the last 8 years learning how to be a better communicator internally. That's one of the things that I've had to get a grasp with. And it's one of the things I've been working with you on, and the leadership team, is we have to repeat messages. And we know that as marketers. I don't know why we struggled with it so hard.
I know it when I think about it now. And or any good PR, right? Any good politician is saying the same thing over and over.
Or any bad politician does it too, usually.
Yeah, but it just, until it finally sinks in and just becomes a thread. It becomes something that is just in everything that we do. So I love the term, we operationalized it. And I think that's a really nice reason. Like if you hear anything in this podcast, hear that, because what I'm going to ask her about in our next podcast is how that came to be, how that unknown, that conundrum ended up becoming an operationalized tool that we now utilize to run our business more effectively than we have in the past.
What I want to unpack on the next episode is how we took our culture. I mean, we're calling it remodeling for a reason. And we took ours down to the studs, and we built it back brick by brick, and we're still building, because like I said, we plan to grow.
Yes.
So it's a constant. And I'm also going to share the resources and learnings, because I think it's critical to, there's so much out there. And so what I want to highlight were the resources that really helped me the most. Okay. I've talked about some of those today, sort of the ideals that really helped me get my arms around what culture is. But next, in the next episode, I really want to be more specific about particular aspects to really help those in a position to either lead cultures, reshape them, but be a part of one, be a healthy part of one. If you care about the company you work for, you should care about the culture being the healthiest that it can be. So, this is important for, like I said, for our company going forward. And so it's something we constantly are talking about.
Yeah, it's imperative. So thank you for getting ready to sort of peel back the layers and help folks deal with this very big topic. So stand by, come back next week. We're not done yet. All right, this is exciting, because now we're going to talk about our music moment.
Yay!
The most fun part.
Okay. Are you going to surprise me this week? Because I don't have any notes here.
I don't have a surprise, but I do have a direct question.
Oh, okay.
What's up with the Spotify shit show?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me something. Oh, okay. So you were on the low country, and while you were away in the low country,
I came back and all my joys went to hell in a handbasket.
Well, thankfully they didn't.
Yes,
but close. So what essentially started out is some of the artists on Spotify. I'm not going to name them, but they're not necessarily, in my opinion, today's most popular artists. But they do have their rights, and they can put their music where they want to put it. They decided to boycott their music on Spotify because of Spotify's, there was a very popular, I don't know.
Speaker?
No, they're
personality?
artist.
Okay.
On Spotify, a podcaster, and they were having issues with the information that was being shared, which, okay. And if that artist wants to take down their information, okay. And they have every right to do that.
Sure.
And so I don't have a problem with that. I can pick that decision apart all day long from an opinion standpoint, but let's not waste anyone's time. Where it got real And where it got real upsetting for us is when one of our heroes, Brene Brown, decided to pause her podcast.
Kind of abruptly.
Very abruptly. I'm going to get to that. So we're major Brene fans. In fact, yesterday we started a 6-week book club covering her new book, Atlas of the Heart, which, by the way, is basically a Bible for emotions.
Yes.
And we're all super excited. And so she, over the weekend, put out on her social media. In fact, I have the actual, let me pull up
the tweets,
the Twitters and the Instas. She says, I will not be releasing any podcasts until further notice. To our communities, I'm sorry. I'll let you know if and when that changes. Ooh. And then she did heart, fist, heart emojis. So, first of all, I have 2 major issues with this.
Okay.
Brene decidedly, and I don't know if it was a year ago or maybe over a year ago, to go exclusive with her content for her podcast on Spotify. So she made that decision to partner with this company.
Sure.
And at the time, I was listening to her stuff on Stitcher, another platform, but she went to Spotify, and I've now gradually moved most of my podcast over to Spotify. So because of her, and I was already a major Spotify listener from a music standpoint. Mm-hmm. So she made the decision to be exclusive. She knew their policies. She knew all about what they were doing. And so she made this decision to join these other artists and standing in, I don't know, solidarity, because they all disagreed with a famous podcaster on there. I mean, y'all can Google it. It's not.
I don't want to say it.
Oh, don't say the name.
Should we say it?
It's out there.
Joe Rogan.
I don't know. I've never listened to his podcast, so I don't have an opinion on it. But they definitely have issues with something he's saying.
Yes.
Okay, fine. But to take down your content, I mean, we rely so heavily on your content, Brene.
We love you so much.
We love you so much.
Wow.
Like, it was like you were taking a part of us away. So I just had an issue because there was no other place I could go to listen. So if you would have made this decision 2 years ago, I'm going to pull my content and my podcast from Spotify, I would have been like, fine, I'm just going to go listen to it over here on Apple or wherever else I can listen to podcasts. But you made the decision to go exclusive. So I had an issue with that. Okay. But the biggest issue I had is with the lessons I personally, and I know you and all of us have learned from Brene, is to be unclear is to be unkind. And I found her cryptic, unclear messaging to be disheartening, because I read this. I had no idea about this Spotify controversy. I had no idea. So I'm thinking,
something's wrong with the family.
No, something's wrong with the family. I literally thought something horrible had happened.
We feel that close to her.
Yeah.
Like somebody's in trouble.
She can't take down our lifeline.
No.
And we depend on it. And she knows
wouldn't.
It. No, she wouldn't.
Unless it was a big deal. It was a big deal.
So I'm glad you brought it up. Here's the thing. She put that out. I don't know. I think it was on Saturday or Sunday. I know I saw it while I was streaming through during the games. But she's come back. So to Brene's, she has responded. And so you can Google it. But her decision. And what she's basically said was, I decided to do that because I wanted to get curious. And what does she say? I paused because as a creator with 2 podcasts exclusively on Spotify, I wanted to better understand the organization's misinformation policy. So that's why these artists were pulling their music and or their podcasts, is because they felt like there was a misinformation being shared that was harmful to culture.
Yes.
And then say that.
Yeah.
Then say,
don't give us
dear
a heart
communities, I'm pulling the podcast until I can get squared away with Spotify's, what their policy is on misinformation. I'm going to be meeting with the leadership team, which she did 3 times. And so does she, as a leader, does she have to share her decision? And this is kind of where Self-Smarter comes in. She went against what she has taught us to do, is to be much more clear. And the fact that she almost had a dig, there was some snarkiness, and being someone who can be the queen, and maybe I had an art form at one time of being snarky, and I still can be, is that I'll let you know if and when. It was that statement that sent chills down my spine, is there's a possibility she might not
never come back.
So what she did is she inadvertently in that moment put herself against this other podcaster that was the source of, controversy. So it became her against him, and she made this either or. And so she had to go back in her basically her update.
Yes.
Which is basically her response was, no, that's not the case at all. And that dear listeners, my podcasts are returning next week. So it's just an interesting, it's a great example for us leaders.
It is.
It is an absolute great example.
Decision in haste.
Decision in haste. You know, she clearly
Rushed
didn't. Maybe
crisis.
I don't think this post came with the 24-hour wait period, which I've had to learn.
Yes.
And so I think it's just it's a great lesson. And I'll be honest with you. I'm never gonna. Brene would have to do a lot for me to not continue to follow her and her research and her content. But in that moment, I didn't disagree. I did disagree absolutely with how she handled it. The approach.
And we don't all have to agree all the time,
And we
do
don't.
we?
And she says that at the end.
Yes.
She says at the end of her decision. So anyway, that's
the music moment.
That's the music.
Then I'll be thinking about a brighter one
Good.
for next week.
Good.
Because it is going to be a heavy and a deep episode. So we'll end it on a high note.
Okay.
But I think now it's a good time to wrap.
Okay.
And let's just plan on gathering again next week.
All right.
Around our remodel. Mm-hmm. You love a remodel?
Well, no, I can't say that I do.
You don't like a remodel? I love a remodel.
I know you do.
Yeah.
But the one I did on our culture wasn't the easiest of things.
No.
And neither was the house or this office. So no, it's not my favorite thing to do in the world, but I know that they need to happen.
Yeah.
So I appreciate them.
Now, a DIY project, which this is hard.
Yes.
That's blood, sweat, and tears. And that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yes.
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 So, because somebody else can't do it, you had to do it yourself.
Correct.
All right. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcast. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming self-smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.